We're going to smoke this place out with all that incense. I'm just kidding. You know, one of my favorite things about when we first started dating, that you would light incense and bring it outside when we would sit on your deck. That was one of my favorite things.
Really?
Yeah.
I do love some incense. We should welcome everyone to our backyard, huh?
Hi.
Hi. Welcome. I'd like to say this is what we normally do when we podcast, but it's not. It is the summer solstice.
Happy solstice.
Happy solstice. We thought it would be appropriate to be outside as the sun sets. The lighting on the video will probably get worse if you watch this whole thing, but whatever.
Whatever. It's an experiment. This is the first time we've done this. So.
Yeah, outside. And we're excited to talk about some masculinity. Which I feel like
I love me some masculinity.
Which I love because I think it's important to, when I look at our podcast listeners, and there's some analytics that you can see, most of the time we're at like an 80-20 split of female to male.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
So
see, I don't look at that stuff.
I know you don't. So I feel like as we talk about this masculinity stuff, I hope that this message gets to, the men that are out there that are listening or that might start listening, but also the importance of this conversation for women and for women that are either in relationship to, with a guy, or women who are raising boys, or women who are trying to figure out what they want in a relationship with a man. And the things that we're talking tonight are relevant to all of that, as well as the masculinity that everyone holds, the masculinity that the feminine holds, the masculinity that helps drive the groundedness to step into one's own femininity. So
I had somebody tell me just this last week, like, thank you for your masculine structure that you brought to the group, like in a group.
And there's a group I was in.
Yeah, right. Well, you were bringing masculine structure as well, but ladies, we hold it too. Yeah. And these are lessons and things that I've learned about it as well. Jason and I talk about this stuff all the time. We love talking to each other. That's something about us. We just love talking to each other. And these are the types of things that we talk about. So one day we decided, why don't we do a podcast?
Totally.
These are the things we love talking about. So
yeah, these are the secrets, right? That we tell. And tonight we want to talk about the secret of masculinity. And again, if you're just listening, set the scene a little bit. We're in our backyard. The lights are hanging. It's probably one of our favorite places in the entire house. We love being out here with the kids. What you can't see on camera is the mess of toys that are just everywhere of the kids playing.
And my wild garden.
The wild garden. We've got the hammocks behind us that the kids love hanging out in. And so if you hear background noises, if you hear dogs barking or weird things, get over it. You can enjoy being outside with us.
Yeah.
So, well, love, where should we start?
What do you believe is probably one of the biggest misconceptions that you see around masculinity? That is that it's pretty common today.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions.
Why are we talking about this?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that most, not maybe most, but a lot of men don't even know what it means to be masculine. So to think about like the misconception is that the only option to be masculine is the toxic masculine or the patriarchal masculine. And as a society, rightly so, we have rejected a lot of the negative energy that those two forms of masculinity have brought to our society. And so, especially in the last 30 years, there's been such a significant move into equality and the rise of feminism, which I think are all really important things. But in the midst of that, men kind of lost track or lost a sense of what it really means to be a man, because what they see is, the options are like the Andrew Tates of the world, right? Like these uber masculine, chauvinistic, and again, that term toxic masculinity gets thrown around a lot, which I think we don't realize that those are two separate words. They kind of feel like one. Like masculinity is toxic.
Yeah.
Right? So because of that, it's created this misconception that, what it means to be a man is now, like, I think over shifted into a lot of feminine energy. And that's where I was. Because I didn't like the toxic masculine. I never connected with what was given to me around the archetypes of what it is to be a man. So if it's not the toxic masculine, right, the other archetypes we have often are things like
beta male.
What's that?
Beta male.
Well, the beta, but also the traditional archetypes like the warrior, the king, the sage, right? These were things like I grew up listening to in church, especially in like a lot of men's groups that, did an okay job of like, yeah, we don't want the toxic masculinity, but the other option is like, you're going to be a warrior, and you're going to fight, and then you're going to shift into becoming a king of your kingdom, and that's fatherhood. And then you're going to shift into being a sage. And again, all these things have an element of truth to them, but I never connected to them. In fact, I, being in the church and being in the religious space, for, well over a decade, when I think back to my early years in high school, we read Wild at Heart. Like Wild at Heart by John Eldridge came out, and it captured the essence of what it means to be a man. In fact, I was in a godly men's class in high school, my senior year. There was this course that we could take called Godly Men. And it was like it was like at 7 a.m. in the morning. It was an actual class at the school. And we studied like Wild at Heart. And I remember having to work through it and just not connecting with it, not being like, I remember there's a story in the book where he talks about wanting to, his son gets into a fight and he encourages his son to punch back. And I remember thinking Jesus would never punch back. Jesus would turn the other cheek. Violence is ugly. And violence is not part of the masculinity that I want to be a part of. So I like completely disconnected myself from that. And so I think that kind of began to set the groundwork for a lot of, and I think a lot of other men have had these experiences where they now don't really know what is appropriate masculinity. What does it mean to be a man? We've kind of been this like neutral thing where it's like, yeah, we're men, and yeah, we're sexual, and yeah, we got a cock, but like, I don't really know what that means.
Where do you feel like you went into instead? Tell me more about that, about where you're like, I don't want, not the toxic masculinity energy.
I think I moved more into the feminine energy of like my emotions, wanting to like, and I'm kind of naturally good at those things. People come to me because I'm emotionally intelligent. And because I held that emotional intelligence, I always thought that was just feminine. I didn't realize, there's a masculine emotional intelligence. And so I never really was able to tap into the masculine energy of it. And so it felt very flowy. I was very unstructured. I had a hard time with like the actual structure of something. And some of this is just part of my own design. It's not just like my understanding of masculine and feminine, but yeah, and then I also just kind of went to like not really thinking about it. I just did it. I just kind of existed. So as I stepped into fatherhood, it was just like, I don't really know what it means to be a father, but I'm just going to be a father, like without really understanding masculine energy.
So what do you think the consequences of moving into that more feminine energy and that type of masculine, that expression of masculinity that you lived for, quite a while? What do you think of the consequences?
Yeah, I mean, I think the consequences are in a relationship. Often the feminine takes over the masculine energy of the home, and then you really begin to feel what emasculation is. Like you really feel like, oh yeah, I'm not really living into my masculinity because I'm not holding the masculine energy of this home. And I think a lot of men are in that space. Yeah. That I think again, in this pattern, we've seen a lot of women rise into their masculine in a beautiful way. But as they rose into their masculine, the balances have been thrown off kilter.
There is a healthy way to be masculine and be a woman.
Absolutely.
Like that, I think also with the divine feminine energy on the other side of things, on the divine feminine rising, or, you know, I want to get into my femininity, all of a sudden structure goes away out the window, and there isn't much safety. Then it's really hard to create safety and structure in your life when you throw out all the good things that the masculine energy brings, creating the container for the home, creating the safety, creating the structure with which the feminine gets to expand and create and fill and overflow.
Yeah, and so I think we see this kind of reality where a lot of men don't really know their place in the home because their partners are pretty, you know, against the patriarchy.
Well, they don't even know how to take it back,
right?
Too. Like once they realize this, oh shit! Like,
right?
How do I take this back without being in that patriarchal masculine? That, you know, the toxic masculine.
Totally. Because like try to understand.
Because she's not going to give it back to me.
No, she's not. The feminine is not going to release that unless they're in that same posture with you, where they're ready to release it. But they're only going to be ready to release it once they can know they can trust the man, and they can really trust the masculinity. And that is what every guy's got to begin to figure out: is how do I begin to show up in a way. And what does the work look like where I can begin to build it without taking it away so that she can ease into the safety?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that if you're sitting here and you're like, oh shit, that's my relationship. I would say from my perspective, because I've been in that masculine role so many times in a relationship, not in this one, but you
started off in our, like,
yeah.
You probably had,
well, it took some time for me to grow and trust you. Yeah. Right. So absolutely. I've been there's so much distrust with men and the masculine. Can you hold this? Can you handle me? Can you flow with me? Can you let me be me? Right. And so, I mean, if you're in a relationship where your woman is in that masculine and you don't know what to do, I would say start showing up consistently in something. Your discipline and your consistency, when you said you were going to do something, you did it. When you said you were going to show up somewhere on time, you showed up on time. Yeah. And when you said you were going to call, you called me. When you said, like, you never left me on red, it was you were consistently showing up, and then that builds trust. So I see, you know, that's one way. Or another way, which is not so fun, is the feminine will burn out and then she can't be in the masculine. Physically, she gets sick, right? Or something happens where she injures herself, or something happens where she can't be in the masculine. She has to be in the feminine. She has to be in the energy of receiving.
Absolutely.
So if that's what your relationship looks like, I would say that would be one of the first steps from my perspective. What about you?
So I think this is really what has become the core teaching that I believe men need to step into, and I'm shaping so much of my work around in working with men is to be able to take back to really step into your masculine. You have to be able to say no. You have to rebel. And we're going to break this down. We're going to talk a lot about this, and this is really going to be, in many ways, the theme of what we're talking about tonight is this idea of the rooted rebellion, and what I'm inviting men into and what I've been doing in my own life. But to kind of go back to that first step for a man to step into their masculinity is to begin to set a boundary and to start with the rebellion of saying no. And now what do you say no to? That can be a lot of different things. And that's really the thing that you got to do some of that inquiry around, but you probably know. Like, you probably know in your life, where is the no? And it could be to yourself. It could be like, no, like telling yourself no, like no more laziness in my body, no more not showing up for myself in that way. It could be saying no to a habit and saying you're gonna stop something, but you're gonna set kind of that line in the sand, that no more. It might be the thing you have to tell your partner. You might need to tell your partner no. And that may not go super well in the beginning if she's not ready to hear it.
Yeah.
But if you're, again, you might have, if you're being consistent in some areas and you already have that established, but you're watching something happen where you just need to tell her no and to call her on her shit and call bullshit on something, you got to step up and say no.
When do you think can you remember back of what do you think was one of the first times you really told me no, like a big no? Can you remember anything?
The first thing that comes to mind is actually it might have been 2 years ago. I wonder do you remember it? Do you have something in mind?
I don't know if it's on the hard drive or not.
Oh, okay.
So.
But I'm just wondering if you remember the first time I told you no. Okay.
No.
So the first time I really remember
I like to forget those times.
I know you do. The first time I really remember saying no, and I wasn't sure how it was going to go, was it was 2 years ago, you wanted to fly out to California to meet your friends for 4th of July. And things had been a little crazy. And I was like, I don't think this is a good idea. And I was like, no, I'm sorry. It wasn't 4th of July. It was, we had been doing a bunch of stuff with work, and you really wanted to go out to Florida and visit them.
Oh, yeah.
And like you pushed pretty hard for it. And I was like, no, like this doesn't make sense. It doesn't, timing, financially, all of it, I think is too much of a stretch. No. And it was like telling you no when it comes to like travel
or like friendships and people
and getting out of town
and having fun
because we were in a season of life that wasn't super fun and you wanted a break, you kind of wanted to escape it, and I was like, we can't do that right now. And you heard it and you're like, okay, you're right, I see it, like, okay. And we moved on. But yeah, I feel like it's been in that category that I feel like I've told you no the most, where I'm like, no, that's not a good idea.
You've been the party pooper.
I am. I feel like you come to me with these amazing, grandiose ideas, and I'm like, no, that's not going to work out.
Please don't tell me no to Phoenix. I really want to go.
We're going to Phoenix. We'll figure that out. But that's the thing is like, when you're in flow in your relationship, you can say no, and the other person should be able to see it from your perspective, because you actually have a legitimate reason for why you're saying no. If that person can't come around and try to see it from your perspective, then that's where you need to begin to understand, okay, what am I missing here? But the rebellion that men need to step into is finding that thing in themselves, or that area that they've been lazy, or they've been too laxed, or they've been denying themselves, denying like an element of who they are or what they want. And the only way that you're going to begin to reignite your masculinity is by being able to say no. Because what I believe is that's the thing that's going to spark your heart. Because ultimately what you're on the path to find is your yes. Is what is the thing that is going to drive you? What is the thing that lights you up? And a lot of men don't know what that is, because they're just doing the thing. They're doing work.
Apathetic.
They got married. They have kids. They're like
checked out.
They're checked out.
Lazy balling it.
And so what they end up doing is they're silently rebelling against their life. They're saying no to the people that are around them. They're saying no to being present with their children in a meaningful way. They might be around, but they're not like present, right?
Yeah.
They're not creating safety. Their children don't feel safe around them because they don't know what emotions are going to come out or how dad's going to respond, right? That's a key thing in the masculine is, do your children, like, how do your children feel safe with your emotions? Or like, because if you don't feel safe with that, they're not going to feel safe with that. It doesn't mean you're not going to be, mess things up. Like I get angry at the kids. I can get really angry with the kids, but the kids feel safe with me because they see how I handle my anger. And when I do step out of bounds, or maybe I do something that is inappropriate because I'm angry, I can go ask for forgiveness and come back to baseline. And the baseline is consistent. There's going to be blips, but emotionally, I'm consistent. I'm even keel. And I might have days where it goes a little up and down, but I'm able to be that like emotionally regulated, grounded, safe place for them to come to.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think that even keeled means, I want to clarify that a little bit. Even keeled doesn't mean that you're stoic.
Yeah.
You're not just some stoic, unemotional man who's just, but I believe that and not even just balanced emotions. I believe that we need to start talking less about balance and more about harmony.
Yeah.
And that your emotional response is well within, and it is in harmony with the experience that's around you.
Totally. That's such a great way to think about that.
And it's also has harmonious energy with the intensity of the experience around you, right? So there are going to be times when you're going to be more excitable and more intense. There are going to be when you get competitive with the kids, or like when we our kids sometimes are like, hey, you guys argue. Like, we don't argue. We have argued, but you'll know if we're arguing, and we don't do it around you.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, you guys fight. We're like, no, we don't really fight. We have passionate discussions.
Exactly. And we let them watch how we come to compromise when we're making decisions. But I also think that that's a key point just to highlight for everyone, that your emotions, the way you can check in is asking yourself, is this harmonious? So like sometimes when I get really angry, am I getting angry at something that does not match what I'm angry at? Like, am I flying off the handle at something, right? Because that's going to signal like your nervous system is so compressed that the smallest things are just setting you off.
Yeah, the threshold's already, right. You're so close to the threshold that it just throws you over.
So you're not living in harmony with what's happening around you.
Mm-hmm.
As you're able to do this work and be able to expand out your nervous system, I think about it like those wooden pellets, right, that we use for the smoker.
Oh,
They're like compressed wood that's so freaking hard.
Yeah.
But the moment you like add a little water to it and you massage it, it expands and it turns into a pile of sawdust. And that's more of what we want out of our nervous system, so we can live harmonious. But that means, like, if one of the kids are disobeying and I'm getting angry, I am getting angry in harmony to the disobedience.
Yeah, it's right, a match.
To the level
You're an energetic match to that.
Exactly. That's not always the right thing. Sometimes energetically, again, we need to like if that. I guess what I'm trying to say is, harmony isn't an excuse to just always match the energy of the person that you're with, right?
Yeah.
When Evelyn's coming to me with all her emotions and she's crying.
She's so dramatic. She's like the dramatic Leo energy. So dramatic. It's amazing.
She's like bringing me the weight of her world. And then I do not need to be, the harmony.
You don't need to match that.
Exactly. The harmony I'm bringing is like co-regulating those emotions for her and saying, bring it to me. Please unload. Share your emotions with me. What are you feeling?
And you listen.
Yeah, and then I just let her talk it out, and then, I maybe do a little inquiry, but often it's just letting her.
Are you hungry?
Yeah, it's like, do you need some water? Like, are you hungry? Like, do you need a hug? Like, do you want me just to hold you for a little bit and just continue to talk, right? So that's what we're going for. But when you do have those bigger emotions, then that's going to be... oh
no, did it get on our...
A little bit, that's fine.
Okay.
A little burn mark, but... So coming back to like this process, it starts with this thing that's going to spark your heart. Because once your heart gets going and you can get back into like that passion, your passion for life, your passion for love, your passion for your work that you're doing on this earth, your passion for how you're showing up, that has to be alive in the heart. And it's the only place that it can really be alive, because it's from there that it's going to expand out through the rest of your body.
Yeah.
You can't get that kick-started anywhere else. You can't kick-start it in your head. And I've seen a lot of guys try to intellectualize
so many.
Right.
Or you go to therapy and try to figure your shit out because your woman made you go to therapy.
Yep.
Like, I have to talk about my emotions and understand my emotions. And it's this whole stoic weird thing because you're not even connected to your body.
Right. Yeah, your heart's not even going. You're not pumping the blood around to power everything.
So about rebellion, where did this come from for you? What brought this up?
Well, I mean, it came from my own life. Came from what I've done over the last 5 years of rebelling. And, anyone that's been listening to the podcast knows about the actions that I took and having an affair. And I was silently rebelling to my life. Mm-hmm. I didn't want that life anymore. And I was just dead. And I didn't know, like, my heart wasn't alive. And I was just kind of a dead man walking in many ways. And so it was when the first moment of rebellion for me, I remember, was when it came time to like the divorce, and I was really processing like what I wanted, whether I wanted to stay in the relationship or not. I remember listening to this podcast with Rob Bell and Liz Gilbert, and Liz
two
was
of your favorites.
They are my favorites. And I remember Liz said this statement of, or maybe it was Rob, but they were talking about the concept of not this. Sometimes you don't know what it is, but you just know it's not this. And I remember being like, that's where I'm at. It's not this. This life, no, not this. And that was the first thing that a decision where I feel like I really made a decision for me and like what I wanted, in a healthy way. I clearly had made selfish decisions of what I wanted in the past that was very destructive, but it felt like a step of me being true to myself and living in integrity with the thing that was what I wanted, which I didn't know what it was, but it was not this. So fast forward 5 years of me living and growing and going through this process of becoming me, stepping into my masculine, being the most masculine I've ever been in my life. And a couple weeks ago, we were at the post office getting Cadence a passport, and both parents have to be present to sign the paperwork to get the passport. And so I'm there with the boys. Both boys have long hair. Obviously, my hair has now gotten to this length. And my ID is a very stoic picture. In fact, maybe that'll be the cover of the podcast, as I'll get a screenshot of my ID so everyone can get a little bit of a sense of where I was at. This was like 2017, so it would have been 6 years ago. Very different version of Jason. Mm-hmm. And the woman behind the register doing all the paperwork and everything looks at the ID, looks at me, looks back at the ID, and then she's like, wow, someone's really rebelled. And says this in front of my ex-wife and 2 boys. And I just thought, wow, there's a punchline to the joke that is my life. Like, woman, if you only knew how much I've rebelled and what I've done and who I am versus who I was in that picture. You're right, I have rebelled. And a few weekends later, it really clicked. I was like, wow, that was the thing that set this whole thing in motion, was rebellion. And, we've talked about dad balls, and we've talked about these other things of masculinity, and those are things that are very, very, very important to this whole process. But I realized that the first step is the rebellion. And that really kind of set me down the path of like, okay, well, what is rebellion, right? Like, rebellion can be, your teenage years can be pretty destructive when it's ungrounded. And you're just making decisions because you're kind of like, fuck you. And you're saying that to your parents. And you're trying to be yourself, but like you're kind of caught up in something that like you're confused. And so that's really ungrounded, right? And that's really unhealthy. But then we see these other forms of rebellion where it's like, fuck you. This is no longer acceptable. I think of like big rebellions, right? I think about like the French Revolution, where the people rose up against the elite bourgeoisie class and it was like, fuck you, we're not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Healthy rebellion. Think about America rebelling and being like, fuck you guys, we're doing it this way. Like, fuck you. That's the energy of a grounded rebellion. But it sent me on a path of beginning to think about how we need to reframe the masculine. Because I was still struggling with, like, really, what does it mean to be a man? Because I kept looking at our traditional narratives, and I was really looking at, like, mythology and looking at even in religion and our spiritual understanding of masculinity and femininity. And I began to kind of question that. So, yeah.
You stopped. I thought you were going to keep
going. Do you
going.
want me to keep going?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want this to be too much of a monologue. I didn't know if you had a question to ask
No.
before we move on.
No, I didn't.
So
like traditional, okay. So how are you challenging? Because honestly, when you first told me about this idea that you're about to lay out, I was not a fan. I completely challenged it. Like, no, that's bullshit. Whatever. How can you say that? You know? So, yeah. I like the challenge and I love it now. But it took me some time to swallow.
Yeah, and I think, this is something that begins to reframe how we think about things. Because so much of our understanding of the patriarchy and the masculine has been driven by the narrative that masculinity lives in the sky. So we think about the sky gods, we think about Father God in the sky, we think about the sun being this deeply masculine energy, which it is. All things, like, it's important to remember, like, there's, in looking at this, we're not saying any of that is untrue. The issue that I kind of had with it is so much of the patriarchy is tied to that energy of the sky. When I think about patriarchy, the best way that I can describe it is limiting. If I were to give it one word, patriarchy is limiting. That the patriarch will always limit the expression of what is possible. And the sun is no better representation of something that is limiting. Now, of course, the sun does all these amazing things and whatever. It also, though, only does one thing. It rises, it freaking sends its heat and light to us, and then it sets.
Yeah.
There's no variety. It's just constantly.
It's a 24-hour cycle.
Right. It's a 24-hour cycle, and it's constantly sending its freaking energy into the universe. It's all it does. It's just emitting constant energy, which is masculine, right? When we think about kind of what the masculine is doing, it is emitting energy. It's showing up. It is often on a 24 cycle, right? It can be consistent in those things. And yet it's also, when we only understand it that way, it limits what men can do and how we can express ourselves, right? I mean, men have like a pretty limited wardrobe of what's possible, right? Like everyone can't see, but you're wearing like these awesome flowy pants. Like, not as socially acceptable for me to rock pants like that. No. Right? Like, I can wear pants, shorts, that's it. Those are the only, maybe like leggings, like some guys, but you got to wear shorts over that stuff. Like, if you just went straight leggings, like, very few guys pull that off. Yeah. Right? Or at least acceptable. Shirts, it's like you have a t-shirt, a shirt, a collared shirt, a button-up, right? Sweatshirts, but you got jacket, like you got the suit situation, but again, pretty limited. And the color palette's pretty freaking limited in what guys can wear as well, right? What's acceptable. And we're just mainstream, right? That's all very patriarchal energy. And so the other side of that is that the earth is very feminine, right? So we got Father God in the sky, and we've got Mother Earth. Over us. He's over us, constantly watching. In control. Right? Controlling, can see everything. Again, energy of power. And then we have Mother Earth, we have Gaia, and we look at the earth as being deeply feminine, right? It's nourishing. It gives us what we need.
It's creating, it's growing.
Right. It's creative. It's beautiful in its expressions. And again, very, very feminine. And most people live in that duality, that the sky is masculine and the earth is feminine. But applying some pretty ancient principles like the Hermetic law, two things I think are really important is one, the polarity of all things. So things are on a pole, right? They can be opposites, but they're still connected. It's the fourth law of the Hermetic tradition. And the seventh law is all things are masculine and feminine. There's gender. Both. Not one or the other, but we hold both. So if that's true, then that means the sky has to be deeply feminine and the earth has to be deeply masculine. We've only been told half the story.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to reclaim as men, is that the grounded, why it's, this like rooted rebellion, is we have to find our masculinity in the earth. That is going to be our path forward. We've tapped out the sky energy of our masculinity. We've been playing that card for thousands of years. And there have been movements of masculinity that's risen up, and it is time for another movement of men who are deeply connected to the masculinity of this earth. But what do I mean by that, right? Well, one, like when you look at the ancient traditions before the Romans and the Greeks, you see, if you go like way back, some of the traditional understandings like Dionysus and some of the other gods, they were masculine earth gods. And they came from the earth. And so when we think about the earth and how is the earth masculine? Well, three things that I think are so important. One, the earth is stable. Like it's got this stability to it. It holds the structure that allows the feminine to create from it. Because without it, the feminine, it would just be, there wouldn't be anything holding it down, right? So when I think about ultimately, like what is the best example of the rooted masculine, it's the mycelium network that is mushrooms, right? And if anyone has ever looked into the mycelium network and the science that's coming out around it, it's incredible to understand how everything is driven by this network. In fact, I wish I would have pulled it over, but the boys were mowing and they found these massive mushrooms that were growing up
over there.
Yeah, in the grass over there. So it's like nice. We're literally, like when we think about that, we're sitting on top of a mycelium network. Mushrooms are just the fruit of that network. And that mycelium network is what connects the trees and the grass and the plants, and it's the
communication network.
Exactly. It
too.
allows nutrients to get passed out around, and if something needs some more nutrients, the mycelium network can go do it, or something needs to decompose, the mycelium network comes around it, decomposes it, and gives it back to the earth so then it can create again, right? What happens with the mushrooms? They rise up and then they shoot their sperm, their spores into the feminine air of the sky. They fly up into the upper ethers. Pieces of water get attached to them. They become clouds, and then they rain back down and replant themselves on this earth. The masculine energy going up into the sky to connect to the feminine storm energy, which is so deeply feminine.
I love storms.
Right? The storm is,
had a good one today. There's actually one right there.
Yeah. There was. We had some good stuff happening earlier. And so that feminine energy of the storm takes the masculine, puts it back into the earth. And then what ends up happening is the feminine energy of creation happens because of this like stable, structured energy that is the earth. And that's where men need to go. And men need to root into that. And men need to reconnect to not just nature, but what does it mean to apply some of these things to your life, like structure, like stability, like safety, right? Because again, we always say like, Mother Earth gets a little crazy, and for sure, right? I mean, you got volcanoes, you got earthquakes, things that can happen that aren't very safe. But then you also think like, wow, but also Mother Nature, a lot of stuff comes from the sky, like storms and hurricanes and asteroids and whatever, like random stuff that happens, like lightning, right? And you have weather that can shift on you. That's not necessarily the earth. That's the atmosphere. That's what's happening around you. I believe the earth in of itself is very, very stable, very safe.
Also predictable.
Yeah.
In some ways, we know that there are going to be seasons, and we know that there's a constant communication between the earth and the sky and the sun and the energy that is there. So, yeah.
But even back to like some of the ancient people that like, you know, when the sky was pretty messed up and humanity was evolving, where did they go? They went into the earth. They built structures in the earth, and they were able to survive in the earth. Right? That's, I think, deeply masculine. It's not like they went into the womb to be born again. Like they were in a structure that was protecting them, consistent in its temperature. Have you ever been in a cave?
Yeah.
When you go down, it's the same temperature.
Yeah.
Right? It's consistent. Like that to me feels very masculine. Very like that, again, stable, consistent energy that then allows the feminine to feel safe. And when it's in a very consistent environment, what ends up happening? Things flourish. Things can just freaking pop off. Like we've gotten so much moisture, consistent moisture. This like we have popped off in a summer, like in Colorado.
Oh my gosh. My tomatoes have doubled within the last 2 weeks. It was amazing.
And that's all because of this consistent, you know, process and energy. So men, I think it's time that we step into this rebellion and we step into our masculinity, but we stop looking to the sky. We stop looking to these traditional archetypes of masculinity, and we begin to almost rewild our understanding of what it means to be a man. And we get back into the wildness that is the earth. And again, wild doesn't mean crazy. Wild just means like untamed. And like, but knowing and stable, consistent, and creating the structure of safety for not only yourself. Like, are you safe in your own energy? Are you safe in your own mind? Can you sit with yourself in breath work or meditation? But also, are you safe enough for your partner to ease into? And man, I don't remember exactly what it was, but like talking about that idea of when you create that safety for the feminine, for your woman to like really ease into her true feminine, that's the ultimate flex of your masculinity. Like men, like if you want to know
entering the feminine era,
totally how you're doing on this stuff, your woman is your fruit. Your children are the fruit of your work that you're doing, and that's the gauge.
And also, as a woman, my work is to continue to not just rely on you to be masculine so I can be feminine, right? It's not, there's harmony there. Yep. So back to the harmony. So cultivating my inner masculine and this, what safety do I create in my my energy? What safety do I create in my body? Mm-hmm. So really also the body is very masculine. Yes. It's the container that holds the nervous system, the innate intelligence, the creative force that makes you and animates you through this world. And so I think also getting in your body, so being consistent, we already talked about this. What's your no, staying and building trust, but also getting in your body. So what are you doing? This is one reason why I love somatic work, because the shifts and changes in my life didn't really start popping off and happening and really coming to me. I understood a lot of things. I was all into the self-help, all of that, right? But I could never really I never understood, why do I keep attracting these men who are either make me wear the pants in the relationship, are not consistent, or who are freaking like nutso, right? There's some other things there. But why do I keep attracting these type of men? I thought that I needed this like toxic masculine, like man. And then I meet you and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm going to break him. I'm going to he is way too soft for me. I can't do this. And but there was something there that I knew I was okay. I'll stick around for this. I'll find out what's going to happen here. Because usually I was able to figure things out within the first 2 months, right? And I tested it, but I couldn't call somebody like you in, or even I couldn't even say yes to somebody like you. Like I wasn't able to even feel safe enough to commit and know that my yes meant yes. That my yes wasn't just because it was yes for the moment. And it was a yes that was partially because I thought I was supposed to. Or that I had to. That was that was the old me, old relationships. And so like women, we have to cultivate and get into our bodies and cultivate our own safety so that we can also harmonize with another man as well. And then I'm able to really melt into feminine energy so much more easily because I trust my own masculine, and I can trust you more easily as well.
Yep. And I think that, again, this work is a two-way street, right? In so many ways. And it's the men are doing the same process of like holding the energy of their bodies, tapping into the masculinity of their bodies in such a way that then they can understand their emotions. But I think what's interesting is a lot of guys might get into their bodies, but they like stop because they're not safe in their body. So then we start looking at like, okay, what's the why? Why are you working out this way? Or why are you, like you could have guys that are super freaking healthy and they look ripped.
Like look fit on the outside.
Right, but inside they're just a mess. And it's like, well, it's because you're not really in your body. You're forcing your body. You're fighting your body. You're not.
Well, you even used to say that you like like you used to force your body to do things.
Yeah, and I like the challenge of it because again, I think that is somewhat masculine. Like, I love a good challenge. I love forcing my body to do things. I love pushing my body to see how far I can
Waking up at 5:30 in the morning, going to CrossFit.
Right. Or now I wake up at 5:15 and I'm going to lift in the gym. Like I really believe in pushing the body, but what men need to do is begin to understand that they can be safe in their body and safe in the structure that it is and do the work. But then what that does is it opens up the ability to tap into the emotions and tap into that feminine energy of flow and creativity and all of the stuff that's accessible to us men that is deeply beautiful. Because again, we are both feminine and masculine, but it's not like a percentage game. It's not like I'm, 49% or 80% masculine and 20% feminine, or the goal is equilibrium between the two. It's about understanding that the organic creative energy that I hold, that is within my nervous system, that was within my higher self, needs the structure of my body and the structure of the container to be able to execute on it. Otherwise, it's just so deeply feminine that it doesn't have anything to actually make it happen. Right?
Well, and that's also, I would say, the definition of resiliency. So we're really talking about, do you have the nervous system or archetypal or emotional resiliency to handle whatever? Your resiliency is your ability to adapt to whatever is coming your way. In the nervous system, I like to teach that it's the ability of your body to harmonize the fight or flight and the rest and digest system. So the ability of you to be able to use whatever you need. So can you use feminine energy when you need it? Can you like up the masculine and structure energy when you need it? And then in relationship with co-regulation, can I step more into structure when you need me to, and vice versa? And that's how I believe that we've been able to flow, is that because we can trust each other to show up when we need each other in whatever way that we need in that moment. Do I need to be more structured in this moment, and you just need to be more emotional, right?
And so that resiliency thing I love, because I came across this story that blew my mind about buffalo. And I never knew this about buffalo and the difference between buffalo and cattle. First, looking at cattle, right? Cattle have been deeply domesticated for hundreds of years. And over that time, I believe their resiliency on some levels was lost.
Yeah.
Because their freedom to be a free animal was basically, breeded out of them. It was through domestication. So when you look at the difference between cattle and buffalo, when a storm comes, so think about the prairies, right? And you got these massive herds of buffalo, and you've got these cattle that are, being taken care of by ranch hands. They don't necessarily have fences, but they have herds, right, of both. When a storm comes, the cattle either run away from the storm, or they hunker down and sit and suffer and die. Like ranch hands would lose massive parts of their herds to like cold spells or deep snow because the cows would just like not move. Versus buffalo, which are free, are connected to the land, that have resiliency, have this innate understanding that they have to run into the storm, and they actually know the direction that is. They have an innate understanding that, and they go into the storm, they will survive because the storm won't last nearly as long. They're moving, they move as a herd, they can get through the massive amounts of snow that might be falling, and that when they get through the other side, they've all survived. And that's what we need to tap into. Storms of life are coming. Things are going to happen to you, especially men. Like, you are going to have storms. What are you going to do? Are you going to be like a cow and just hunker down and suffer through it? Or are you going to bring on the energy of that buffalo and run into the storm, understanding that the only way you're ever going to grow is by going through it? It's the only way. The only path is through. And it's by going through the fire. It's by going through that dark night of the soul. It's by going through some of the hardest shit that you may ever go through that you are ultimately going to find that higher self and that deepest expression of your masculinity. Only by going through the storms.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a storm right now and you're like hunkering down, you're not tapping into that masculine energy that's available to you to like fucking go into it and see what's for you on the other side.
So on that note, there's a storm brewing right above us right now.
There is. It could start raining at any moment. Huh?
Yeah, I can feel it. Like, I can feel the
energy in the air. There's like that calmness. And the smell of rain. So.
Yes. All of that.
That's the invitation for men, is to step into their rooted rebellion. And that when they do that and they engage in it and they engage in their no, that they're going to be able to really find their fullest expression of who they are as a man. And if you want help with that, reach out. I can help you.
Oh, thanks for sharing this. Love you.
Yeah, I love you too. Let's get this all cleaned up before the storm comes.